Hello guys, welcome to the channel. It's me, and this is going to be a second, I'm not sure if that's in the way actually. This is going to be a second ME video, just telling you, just kind of like as part of a series I'm doing, hoping to give people some information that they might find helpful. I don't know. And this one is going to be about symptoms. And the first thing I want to say about symptoms is that even like when I was first ill, but even now, if you go onto a forum and you look at the introductions or the newbie or the general area, you'll find a lot of people who will go on there and say, you know, for the last 6 months I've been feeling really exhausted. You know, have I got ME? Or I've been feeling really exhausted and I've got this, that, and the other. You know, have I got ME or chronic fatigue syndrome, or whatever you want to call it? What you need to do is go to your doctors. I mean, I kind of wanted a series of videos to be a series of videos where I don't tell you what to do, because there's too much of that on the internet. But in this particular instance, you need to go to your doctors. You know, I mean, going onto a forum or a YouTube video and saying I've got this, have I got ME, is just pointless. It's pointless because no one can tell you if you have or not. You know, there isn't a way of testing for it at the moment. Even your doctor probably can't really tell you, but the point is that you need to go to your doctor to rule out everything else first, or rule out what they can rule out within, you know, the scope of tests that they do. So yeah, that's what you need to do. You know, stop going to forums and saying I feel exhausted all the time and I've constantly got a cough or a whatever. Yeah, you're not going to help yourself that way. You know, you need to go to your doctors, get every test that they offer you, and ones that they don't. You know, maybe even push for tests that they don't normally do, but just say I bloody want this test. Get all that done first, and then in the UK, what happens is that you wait a year. In my case, you wait a year. They send you off to somewhere to see a doctor who doesn't actually specialise in ME. He would ask you some questions, and if you match a certain criteria, they plonk you into the ME box. There's the ME box, that's where you go. I'll talk all about that in another video, but that's just as like an opener for this video that's going to be about symptoms. You know, you don't go to a forum and say I've got this and this, I've got ME. That's just a waste of time. Go to your doctors first and go through, even though it might be frustrating for you, you don't agree with the process, you don't feel that they're doing enough for you, you know, you still need to go to your doctors and go through that process, however painstaking it may be. And I found it quite painstaking actually, from a frustration point of view, but I also had an endoscopy and a colonoscopy at the same time, where one camera goes right down that way and another camera goes right up that way, and they meet in the middle or something. I had all that done for no reason, and it was horrible. Kind of glad I had it done, because at the time we didn't know there wasn't some sort of cancerous thing going on in my bowel or stomach or whatever. But yeah, it wasn't a pleasant experience. But anyway, on to symptoms. Now, symptoms is a tricky thing, because if you go to there are certain bodies or organisations, health organisations, I think, that have got criteria for if you've got ME or not. Okay, so have a look for those. They're easy to find on the general ME websites, and have a look through some of those symptoms to see if they relate to yourself. But the problem with ME and the way it's being handled at the moment is that there's literally dozens of symptoms, and if assuming that you have some of those, you get put into the ME kind of bracket. But a lot of them are so general, really, that you're going to have them, because I think most illnesses, if you look at the list, probably would cover so many different illnesses. You know, it's weird the way things are at the moment, but there are a couple of them that seem to be more relevant to ME, and I think they're the ones that you probably need to have, I think, if you're going to get an ME diagnosis, but we'll cover those. So I'll go through the symptoms that I had, and only the ones that I had, not all the ones that you can have. And yeah, we can see if you relate to them in any way, and see what what you think. I'll kind of start at the top and work my way down. But the first thing to talk about, I guess, probably when you look at the one of the titles of the illness, chronic fatigue syndrome, and that is the chronic fatigue. And some people got kind of close to me over the course of the last 2 years that have said to me, "What, you just feel tired all the time?" And I'm sure that's a common comment that people get. And unfortunately, no. I could deal with feeling tired all the time. That will be fine. It will be a million times better than what this is. And it's not, and I've got no anger or bitterness towards those people. It's just those kind of comments just come from ignorance of the disease, really. Generally, because of what's been put out by the NHS, in my case in the UK, and the media and whatnot. Every now and again you get a media piece that says, doctors prove that you can get well from ME by exercising more, which is just absolute nonsense. It's laughable. But let's deal with the fatigue. So for me, the fatigue at its worst was, I think I mentioned it in a previous video, but I was watching the X-Men Apocalypse trailer, and there's a bit where Apocalypse is holding down Professor X, and at its worst, that's how I felt. It felt like there was a big giant man kind of holding me down on the bed, and I literally couldn't move. And that's no exaggeration or over dramatization of the situation. I literally couldn't move. I was lying in bed, and I physically it was difficult to move. My wife would come home from work. I couldn't hold a conversation with her. I was that tired, and that was, or that fatigue, or whatever it is you want to call it. I say tired, and tired just doesn't cover it, but it's just a habit of using those words for things. Yeah. So, and it's worse. That's kind of how bad it was, and it was like that for about a year. So, with periods on and off where I felt a bit better. But for long periods, I mean, even just getting up to go to the loo was something I had to kind of prepare for, and sometimes people had to help me. My wife had to help me. It was that bad. So the fatigue is not just being tired. It's not even the fatigue you probably get from running a marathon or running 10 marathons in 10 days or whatever it is. It's a million times worse than that. It literally is where your muscles just not responding to what they don't respond in the way that you want them to. You're sending messages to them, but they just don't have the energy to respond. But that fatigue also covers your bodily systems. So while I was lying there with this, and I'll move on to the other symptoms now. While I was lying here with the fatigue, there's a lot of other things going on. So if I start at the top and work down, so kind of, I was quite lucky actually, because when I was a teenager, I used to suffer from migraines, and I used to get one occasionally before I was sick, and it got to a point in that first year with the fatigue where I had a permanent headache. So I'd wake up, I had a headache. I'd go to sleep, I had a headache. Wake up, headache. Different types of headaches. Sometimes it was quite extreme, quite distressing. So kind of starting at the top, working down, kind of along with all the fatigue and stuff. Headaches is something that I suffered with, but also a lot of cognitive issues. So as I said about talking to my wife, some of that was because I was just too tired. I was just too fatigued to respond. But other times it was because my wife would talk to me, and it wouldn't register, and trying to think about what she said and coming up with a response was just weird. It was a weird feeling. It was like, it just felt like my brain was working incredibly slowly. But anything sort of from a cognitive point of view, like concentration on a program reading. Reading was like someone had cut my hands off, because before I was sick, I was always reading a book or a graphic novel or something, and that was you know that was horrible, not being able to do that. And even now, I find myself only really reading graphic novels at the moment. Like a novel is a bit too much. So yeah, lots of cognitive issues. Concentration particularly was really bad. I would sit down and look at something, or watch something, and it just wouldn't work. I just couldn't concentrate on it. I would read a line and my mind would just sort of, rebel, or I would just be too tired. It was just like I can't do this kind of thing. So brain and cognitive seem to be quite a key thing. Kind of working my way down, and the two that, and the thing with the symptoms have been the biggest thing for me, because they're the most scariest thing essentially. There's no getting away from it, and the two big ones for me, the problems that people seem to have problems, like people will suffer with headaches more, for example. People will suffer with muscle pains. Some people will suffer with like respiratory and what feels like heart problems, and those were the two that I had the worst, and they were the two most scary. I can remember periods where I was having to think about breathing, to breathe. If that sounds logical, does that make sense? I was having to think about the process of breathing, and breathing was difficult. Like it was, I was kind of breathing in, and I didn't feel like I was getting the oxygen that I needed. And obviously that kind of leads to a panic. And then it makes it even harder to breathe, which was scary. That was one of the most scary symptoms. And also like heart-related issues. So I noticed immediately that my heart rate had gone up, like my resting heart rate. Because before I was, as I said, my diet wasn't, in the previous video, my diet wasn't particularly good, but I was reasonably fit in that I cycled quite a lot. I'd probably say that I used to do a lot of weightlifting. So I was quite strong. So I think I was more kind of a strength-based kind of, not athlete, strength-based exercise rather than cardiovascular. But I did walk a lot and I did cycle a lot, so I wasn't unhealthy. But the thing I noticed was that my heart rate increased almost immediately, and it was weird. It was almost like my body couldn't control it in a way. So even at resting, like my heart rate was like 90, 100 plus. I measured it at, and that was quite weird. It was like my body was constant, and it still feels like it sometimes. My body was constantly fighting something, and maybe it was. I don't know. Yeah, but they talk about with ME, and they talk about the sort of fight or flight. Your fight or flight kind of mode gets activated in ME when it shouldn't be, or that's one of the theories. So my heart rate was kind of going, and it's very disconcerting when you're sitting there all day and your heart rate is 100 plus for no reason whatsoever. But the other thing that went along with that is that I could feel it. So if I sit here now, and like I breathe in, and particularly when I breathe out, my breathing kind of goes like that, because as I'm breathing out, I can feel my heart beating, which again is weird, and it was something that never happened before, and it's a symptom that hasn't gone away. And also something that started immediately after I was sick was that when I laid down on my side, either side, I could hear my pulse in my ear. Now, before people kind of go, "Oh, I've heard about that, and that means you've got a tumour or something." Well, I've kind of gone through all those worries and concerns for you, so don't worry about it. and I don't think I have. I just think it's just part of the. I'll talk about that at the end. But I think it's just part of it. So yeah, that was another symptom. That obviously made it harder to get to sleep than it already was. So yeah, that was the heart related stuff. Moving down, as I mentioned in a previous video, like I had a lot of gut problems over the last three plus years before I was sick. So that was an issue, and that was an ongoing issue, and it still is an ongoing issue, although it has got better recently, but I'll talk about that in another video. We'll just stick with the symptoms for now. And kind of going down into my legs. Weird, because there's I still, again, all these symptoms I'm describing are ongoing, but they're to a lesser degree. As my kind of energy has slightly increased, all of those symptoms have kind of gone as well. Although they're all still there, they've slowly improved as well. But sort of getting down to sort of legs, muscular, talking about arms and shoulders and things. Yeah, just that feeling of, and the way I came to determine how well I was feeling in a day, any given day, was by making a fist. And yeah, and I would determine how bad a day it was, or how bad a day it would possibly be, by making a fist. It's weird, but I couldn't squeeze my hand together. On a really bad day, I couldn't squeeze my hand together. Obviously makes sense when you think about it, because you're using muscles and you haven't got the energy to use them. But it's a good way of telling how you're feeling, and that's how I would judge it, by how I was feeling fatigue-wise, how my muscles were, how the energy how well the energy was flowing to that particular level. Making a fist and determining how difficult it was to kind of scrunch up and really make a fist. It's weird, but also you can tell when you get up and walk around. You just feel that as though you're dragging your legs through kind of quicksand, and that and you can feel an obvious resistance or a difficulty to keep you upright. You know, your legs are having to do a lot more than they would normally do, and this even happens to me now. Kind of when I go out for walks. Yeah, it's a weird thing, but those are kind of the general symptoms that when I looked at, they're general symptoms that can kind of mean anything, really. You could have anything. So when you look at the list of ME symptoms, and you'll see these ones that I've described to you. But you could also associate those with other diseases. That's the weird thing. But the one thing that kind of people use as a determining factor for whether you've got ME or not is called PEM, or post-exertional malaise. And again, it's a weird thing, because it's kind of, unless you stumble, I found unless I stumbled across it by accident, and I feel that unless you do that, how can you tell when you constantly feel poorly? How can you tell if this is a symptom? And the symptom is that if you do some activity, and then a short time or a long time after that, you have a negative reaction from like fatigue and symptoms point of view. That's what PEM is. So you might be feeling all right. You'll do an activity and you'll overdo it, and then a short, anything from a sort of an hour afterwards up to 2 or 3 days afterwards, you will suddenly be almost instantaneously hit by your symptoms. They'll just come back. You don't get them at the time. Well, I've heard of some people getting the symptoms very shortly after the activity, but yeah, it's your body reacts completely unrealistically adversely extremely adversely to the activity you've just done, and that's one of the symptoms that people use to kind of determine whether it's really ME or not. And I stumbled upon it many times stupidly, just from overdoing it. You know, I mean, I've had many periods over the last couple of years. I've kind of learned to kind of, avoid it. But for the first year, I was ill all the time, so it's difficult to tell. But as I got better, I started doing more things. I started to push myself more. That's when you notice it. So I can think of half a dozen instances where I was feeling okay, I did something, And then for me, it generally came on a day or two after. And then I would have, a day or two after this activity, I would immediately be hit by symptoms for no reason other than the fact that you'd done this. I'd overdone it on this particular activity. And these PEM can last for months. You know, literally. I mean, the last time we went on holiday was a couple of years ago, and it was at the beginning of my illness. And I wasn't feeling too bad actually. And we went on holiday to Cornwall, and this is the early stages of the illness, so it hadn't really hit me yet. And I think this was one of the key things that you've got to be careful for overdoing it, because I think that this one instance of overdoing it put me back for a year basically. But it was at the beginning of my illness, and things hadn't sort of fully manifested yet. And we went on holiday we'd had a holiday. I'd kind of stopped working, but we had this holiday booked, and we decided to go because I'd kind of rallied a little bit. I wasn't feeling too bad, and we went on holiday. And our holiday sort of cottage was like a little seaside Cornish village, fishing village, and it was up on a cliff, and there was about 80 or 90 steps up to it. And I did it once, and that was it. Holiday over. And actually, my life probably over for that year, because we came home, and it took me, I would say, literally a year to recover from that. And that's how bad. I think also there was probably other factors there. I think I kind of said to you, I thought the antibiotics I took were the straw that kind of broke the camel's back, but I think that was also one of them, because after that antibiotic period I kind of rallied a bit, although I was still poorly. And then I did that climb, and it's weird, that climb literally did set me back for a year. That's how vicious this PEM thing can be. The holiday was over, I came home, and I was literally in bed for a good part of a year. So you've got to be careful about that, about the whole overdoing it thing. And I'll talk about that in another video. I just kind of want to deal with symptoms for now. But that's it. But PEM seems to be the main symptom that you're judged on. If you go onto a forum and you say, I'm so fatigued, I can't get out of bed, I feel like I've got the flu, I've got gut problems, cognitive problems, head problems, blah, 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 blah. People will say, have you got PEM? If you say no, they say, go away. Yeah, which is not particularly nice, but that's what the internet's like, you know. So that's what if you're new to ME and you've got suspicions, that's probably the thing that will get you a proper diagnosis, I would say. Is that post-exertional malaise thing, where you do some activity and you overdo it, or maybe you don't even overdo it, and then you feel the effects afterwards. Could be a day or two after, could be 3 days after, but you'll suddenly get hit for no reason. The way I tested it was, in the end, was to do a couple of instances where I did a bit more than I thought I should, and then I did nothing. I just waited, and it just hits you. Could be any time. Could be a short time after. It could be 2 or 3 days after. And I think that's it from a symptom point of view. I don't think I've got anything else to discuss. I hope that was clear for you. Anyway, I hope kind of it made sense. But yeah, so for me, you got you had the fatigue, but obviously not just normal fatigue. Kind of cognitive issues. I had heart and respiratory. For me, was the most worrying. And my wife called an ambulance twice during that year because she thought I was about to, pop my clogs, as it were. That's how bad it was. Yeah, and the sort of gut issues, kind of muscular aches and pains and whatnot. And the PEM, that's probably one of the and one of the other things. Yeah, so I'm going to forget to mention symptoms I know, which is quite annoying. I just remembered one of the biggest ones also is sleep. Like I couldn't go to sleep, and that's because of another symptom that is quite common, and it's kind of like they call it wide but tired. So during that time where I was lying in bed for a year, physically finding it difficult to move, my brain was still going like, "Ah!" So you can imagine like being trapped in this body that can't move, but my brain is just going like, you know, it's weird to. I wasn't kind of thinking of anything particularly, but it's weird to. It's a weird, almost illogical thing to say that you're so fatigued you can't move, but you're wired at the same time. And that affected sleep. And again, insomnia is a I don't know if you call it. I guess it is insomnia, but yeah, sleep is another issue with ME, a big issue, and that obviously compounds things because you've got no energy anyway. And not being able to sleep, obviously, you know, makes things worse. But also, I've come to another. I've just thought, we were talking about still. I just thought another symptom that I think is quite often used to you know, to determine if you've got ME or not, and that's unrefreshing sleep. So you get into bed. Yes. So I was lying in bed all day. Sleeping was difficult, but I would get some sleep during the evening or some rest, and you wake up in the morning and that has had no effect on your fatigue. So unrefreshing sleep is another symptom that it's quite important, I think, in determining whether you've got ME or not. Yeah, but sleep was a real issue, and it still is. I mean, I'll talk about it in another video when I talk about things I've done to help myself, but I'm still having problems with sleep, but it's better than it was. But yeah, that's like going to bed and closing your eyes and feeling that level of fatigue, but you can't go to sleep. You just feel wired at the same time. It's the weirdest feeling I've ever had. I'm just waffling now. I'm trying to make sure I haven't missed any symptoms that might be important. I don't think I have. I think that kind of covers it. But yeah, as I said at the beginning, don't go onto forums and say I've got this and this. Have I got ME? Because no one's qualified to tell you, even your doctor. But what you need to do is you need to go through the process of elimination first, eliminating everything else, or as much as you can, before you then say, well, it seems as though this is what I've got. So yeah, that's it. This has been about symptoms. I hope it was clear, and I hope it's kind of being helpful in some way to you. I'm not sure how many kind of people watch videos on ME and chronic fatigue syndrome. I want to thank my normal viewers. You've been very supportive of my first video, and that's always really good. But I hope that people who are kind of starting on this journey also kind of watch your videos, and it'll kind of help them. And if you are, then leave a comment. Just let me know. So yeah, that's it. I've worn myself out, and I'll stop. But I hope it's been useful, and yeah, I will speak to you again soon.